everyone, and welcome back to the Motorgraph World channel. My name is Mari. Today I'm here with the Kia EV6 GT Line. I have been so waiting to see this car in person, so let's take a look at the design and how it drives. We did a review before of the overall design of the EV6, but let's take a look one more time because this is the GT line. There is not that many differences from the front, but still I like this kind of peaked eye line of the daylight running lamps as well as the front headlights. And then when you go down, you have a little bit of a lip on the rib to give you that masculine feature. And now up here on the hood, you have the bulging lines on both ends of the hood. They have a slight curvature and a little bit more volume to add to the hood part. Compared to the IONIQ 5, which is very smooth and it doesn't have that much of a volume, I prefer the EV6 model just in terms of design. And now if you look at the lights here, the composition is quite unique and I like how the design is made. Right now it's on the emergency lights, so they're all blinking at the same time, but when you turn on your blinkers, then these will operate in a sequential line, which is also another good point of the lights. Sleek lines all the way from the front to the end and not too much of the character lines going on, which is quite streamlined and nice. The tires are 255, 45, 20-inch, and they're a square set. I like the bigger tires and the bigger wheels on the car. It just makes it look a bit more sporty. One aspect that I really do like about this car is this line here. It's so sexy with the curvature, with the volume. It looks good from the side and at the back. And if you see one of these driving past you, I think that you'll really notice this line. If I were to be really picky about everything, I'm not really digging these lines on the side mirrors. It looks a bit, I don't know, comic-y. It's a bit too much, but again, it's still side mirrors, so you don't really see that much of it. So now we're looking at the back side of the car. It's very nice with the roof, which is kind of like a coupe line that comes down, and then you have the rear spoilers. And you also have a very relatively large and wide back for the trunk. Usually I don't like these kinds of designs because they make the backside of the car look pretty fat, but for this one I think it works because if you look from the side, there is a slight curvature. It doesn't look too boring and too big. And then you come down and you also have these lights at the back. I love these bars that you can see, but then I don't really like this kind of, I don't know, hexagon jewel type of cutting that they've put in here. But then I still like the upper part, so I can compromise with that. You also have the new Kia logo and the EV6 logo on the back of the car. And if you look at the bottom, you can see that you have the reverse lights and it's quite far down. So it might be a little bit difficult for other drivers who are following the car to see. But, you know, I think that it still works in terms of the design. So now let's open up the trunk and see how spacious it is inside. It's a very easy one-touch open and it's automatic. And as you can see, it's very flat inside and really spacious inside. Maybe not the height, but still it almost covers up to the top of my head. And even if I have my legs out all straight, I still have some room left over. And if we fold up these seats, I think that it will even be longer. But because of this slope, there may be some people that don't think it's as spacious because they can't stack up their luggage in the trunk. And now let's open up the bottom compartment. You have your basic necessities, the tire mobility kit, as well as a duster. And you can also open this total part up. You won't have a very deep compartment, but still you'll be able to put in basic toolkits. At first glance, you can see that it's very futuristic, the interior. A lot of effort has gone into the design. Let's first start off with the basics. First, line of sight. Compared to the IONIQ 5, I think the EV6 is slightly narrower. Maybe it's because of the A-pillar, how it's a bit more slanted. Not necessarily in the actual size of the car, but in the viewing angle. And inside you have this wide screen. It's a combination of two screens, 10.25 inches, and everything looks very streamlined and sleek. And as for materials used, it's very, how should I put it? New. I don't think I've ever seen this kind of material being used before, not in Kia Hyundai cars. I think it's the first for the EV6. There may be some people who don't really like this kind of material, but for me, I think it works. And the steering wheel, it's a GT line, so it's a bit more sporty. I like the grip, and it's not too thin. You have a firm grip on the steering wheel, and in the center you have the new Kia emblem as well. Overall, compared to the IONIQ 5, the EV6 is much more driver-centric. Every knob, every detail is slightly geared towards the driver, whereas the IONIQ 5 was more of a roomier family type of car. Everything was flat, more space, and even the console could be pushed back. However, that's not the case for the EV6. Even with the start button and the rotary, as well as all of the panels here, they're put at an angle so that the driver can easily access them while driving on the road. I also like that this specific version has used different types of materials inside. And now here you have that striped new fabric, and then here you have the leather, and then in other parts you have plastic, but on the door trim you also have the suede-like material in line with the black high gloss and the plastic on top. So that also gives you kind of more depth into the design, and even when you're just entering the car, you have multiple different design features that really pop out at you, which is also, I think, really nice. And now the center console. A lot of people don't like this kind of black high gloss, but I think that in this car, in the EV6, if you think of maybe having a matte plastic or just a plain black plastic on this, it just wouldn't look aesthetically pleasing. I also like the stainless steel kind of looking plastic that they've used. This isn't steel, this is actually plastic, but it looks like steel. You also have the touch panels for the HVAC and also the analog knobs in order to turn into the different temperature zones. And you also have a phone charger. This is also a really optimal position for me as a driver. You also have two cup holders and a pretty deep center console compartment right here. Just like the IONIQ 5, it had a lot of space down here in the center console. They mentioned that you can put in your luggage or bag here. I wouldn't really put my bag in here, but still you have a lot of space to put whatever you need. You also have the USB chargers, one here, and you also have the C-port charging outlet right there. And now the seats. This one is, in particular, I think a little bit more comfortable because where you have the knee rest right underneath your knee is very cushiony. There you have a lot of cushion. I personally don't like the design that they've applied here with the two-tone. It's kind of like a suede type of material in the center with perforation. But then they've also applied this ivory white leather as a lining. One thing about the sunroof. Unlike the IONIQ 5, which you can opt for a panoramic sunroof, this one only has the generic version. So for those of you who want that wide space and the skyline and being able to see the sky from inside, especially with the second row seats, this one won't offer that option. It's only halfway, and compared to the IONIQ 5, it looks quite small. Very spacious. You have a lot of legroom, and there is no center tunnel, which is probably the biggest benefit of EVs. You have the same kind of perforated seats at the back with the ivory white leather lining. As for headroom, I have maybe one palm that fits from the top of my head to the ceiling. One drawback, I think, is that even in broad sunlight, in broad daylight, it's quite dark inside. Because of the lack of the panoramic sunroof, the people who are going to be sitting in the second row seats might feel that it's a bit dark. Because of the coupe line from the roof as well as from the bottom up, the windows in the second row seats will be a little bit narrower compared to the IONIQ 5 and compared to the front row seats. And now let's try the center armrest. It's simple. It has two cup holders, and you can also get rid of the cup holder part and just place anything that you need here. As for the recline, this is the upright position, and if you lean back, it's not that much of a difference, but still you have a little bit of a recline feature, and it's quite comfortable if you sit. You have air vents on the B pillars, and for the chargers, if you need them in the second row seats, you have the C-port chargers on the seats of the front row seats. And then you also have it right here where you can actually plug in 220 volt plugs in the middle right here. So now we're out on the road and we've started driving on the normal mode. You have different drive modes, the Eco, Normal, Sport. Driving itself is very smooth. You don't actually feel that it's an EV actually. It has the various different features, and since this is the GT line, maybe that adds a little bit more to fun of driving. Some EVs I feel are a bit too boring and a bit too quiet for my taste. Yesterday, our tester also did the 0 to 100 kilometers per hour test, and it turns out that the EV6 GT line has about 4.6 seconds from 0 to 100 kilometers. So that's pretty good. I've been going on a lot of speed bumps as well as the creases on the roads. It's completely smooth. But compared to the IONIQ 5 or some other EV models, you can actually feel of the bumps on the road. I'm guessing that this car would probably be very fun to drive even on a circuit. It's not like any of the EVs where you're just thinking of it as a family car. It's certainly a driver's car. So as for the driving comfort, it's not completely smooth and completely gliding. It does have a little bit of a harder suspension, which I prefer, but this is more of a preference issue. Now that I have changed it to sports mode, it's not really sports mode under my category, but you do have a bit of a stronger push for the car. And when you put your foot on the accelerator, then you get that louder humming noise from the motor. But because there's a lot of people who yearn for the engine sound of the internal combustion engines, there's a lot of efforts to create some kind of sound from the electric motor as well. I think this is one of those efforts. Driving is quite fun. Once again, it doesn't really feel like those usual electric vehicles where you don't really feel that you're driving a car. For me, it feels more like gliding on some kind of, I don't know, like skateboard or something. But this one actually feels like you're driving. 이거요. So this car has quite a large turning radius. I just made the same U-turn as Mercedes-Benz E-Class, and that one had a much narrower turning radius, whereas this one kind of had to go all the way. It's the characteristics of the long wheelbase, and so you just need to get used to making a bigger turn when you're doing a U-turn or when you're turning the car itself. Some new models these days are built on a rear drive mode, and you have a shorter turning radius, but that's not the case for the EV6. So again, the turning radius is quite large. This is a 4-lane street, and I almost went to the 4th lane, so Just beware that it does have a wide turning radius. So you can see that there's a lot of design features put into the car. As we're driving, it's still broad daylight, but you see the ambient lights, the stripes that mimic the stripes that are used on these materials down here. These are all the ambient lights. Also in the center console, right next to the rotary, as well as the start and off button on the door trims as well. Right now it's set to a light blue color, but you can also change the color of the ambient lights. You can play around with them and find the color of your choice. So now I have the side blinker on before I make a U-turn, and you also have the camera that shows you where you can turn. This also works for when you're changing lanes, but also when you're parallel parking. It's also a really good function because you don't need to, pull your head out of the car to see the lane, and it gives you a very clear focus on where you're parking. Another one, it has these surround cameras for the side, front, and back. Camera shows you a view of a 45-degree angle. It's a bit easier for me to just look outside and get into the right parking position. It could be a bit confusing when you first start and try to use it. And we've been going around the city, and as you can see at the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, you have remaining battery life, which is 53%. We started off at around 70%-ish, and then when I started driving the car, it was down to 60-something%. Now it's down to 53%. The electric vehicle mileage, or the range that is shown on the display, is 5.2 kilometers per kilowatt hour. It's not great. Usually you would expect the mileage itself would be a little bit better in the 6-kilometer range, or even some of them even in the 7-kilometer range. But right now it stands at 5.2 kilometers per kilowatt hour. If you have smoothness of driving, then you might not have the driving fun. But I think this one has both. It's stable and it has great handling. There is no trade-off for this car. So everyone, what did you think about our EV6 review? I'm personally not emotionally ready for an EV just yet, but if I had the luxury of owning a second car, I would definitely pick this one. So tell us what you thought about our review and post a lot of comments and your questions down below. For that, see you next time.